Hello and welcome to Solutions Without Problems, our new show here at Versus Nerd Stuff. I'm Josh and this is the Thought Corner, always used. Maybe they'll let me hang a photo or something here next time. But in this series, we're going to talk about ways to fix the things that we love, even though they're not really broken. In this video, we're going to talk about Pokemon types, a little bit of history about why they are what they are now, and ways that we can approach it thematically to add new types to enrich the Pokemon experience. In the first generation of the Pokemon games, there were 15 types, which I'm not going to bother listing out here. But the 15 types were not really 100% balanced. Specifically, Psychic type was incredibly powerful. And in the second generation of the games, Game Freak added Dark and Steel to help balance this out. For many years, this would go unchanged until the Fairy type was added in Gen 6 to balance out the dominance of the Dragon type. So we're going to approach it like this, thinking about the way that Pokemon are arranged now and how we can add to this to better allocate the Pokemon that already exist. The first type we want to get out of the way is the Shadow type, first introduced in Pokemon XD Gale of Darkness on the GameCube. Now, people who talk about this as a separate type, but it really doesn't make a lot of sense to think of it as its own type, because it affects Pokemon that already exist. And if it were a true type, it would basically be the exact same type as Dark type. We tend to like to think of it more as like a form change, like a mega evolution, than it is its own actual type. So the most common type that we see added to Pokemon across the internet is the Fossil type. This type of Pokemon would take all of the Pokemon that you revive from fossils as part of the game's story and put them in their own little bucket. We prefer to think of it as an ancient type more than a fossil type, because this type would really highlight how these Pokemon are primordial and not like the Pokemon that exist today. It would help put them in their own distinct place and give them a little bit of something special to highlight their ancient nature. Thinking of Pokemon from a Darwinian perspective, this would really highlight the changing nature of Pokemon over time. Many millennia ago, there would have been a normal type that wouldn't look like the normal type today, and ancient could be that old normal type. Another type that gets thrown around a lot across the internet is a sound type. This is one that's most commonly associated with Loudred or Noibat and Noivern, maybe Jigglypuff thrown in here too. But really outside of this, this type doesn't have a lot of examples of Pokemon that really not only use sound type moves, but are really need sound as part of what they are thematically. One type of Pokemon that was suggested a lot before the 6th generation of games was a Light type, which would form a pair with the Dark type and kind of encapsulate the magical Pokemon, kind of like Clefairy, Clefable, and other mystical creatures within the Pokemon universe. But this type was really covered by Fairy type, which is genuinely like a very magical, ephemeral type of Pokemon anyway. A popular fan-made type is the Cosmic or Galactic type Pokemon. This would also include Clefable as well as Deoxys and other Pokemon that are not of this world, and it would thematically highlight their separation from the norm of Pokemon by them being external to the planet that they came from. The problem with this type, though, is that other than the examples I already listed, there aren't a ton of Pokemon that would really fit this bill, and therefore the game that introduced the type would also have to introduce a lot of Pokemon within this type to really bolster the ranks. This could work in Solar and Lunar as part of the game's story, but outside of that, this type doesn't hold a lot of weight. I mean, that does sound like a really cool storyline, like invading Pokemon from another world, really tries to tie the world together against this common enemy. I mean, it's been done, Independence Day, but it's also really cool. One of Versus Nerd Stuff's favorite made-up types, and my personal favorite, is the Synthetic or Artificial type. This type of Pokemon would include Genesect, it would include Porygon and Ditto, as these artificial, not of this world Pokemon that really highlights their nature as man-made creations, because they shouldn't be totally compatible with normal Pokemon. They should be distinct. One way that we could tie this in with another type mentioned, the Ancient type, would be to retype Mew and Mewtwo. We could change Mew into Psychic and Ancient and highlight its nature as the primordial Pokemon, and Mewtwo as psychic and synthetic, and highlight its nature as a man-made creation. It would really help make those two Pokemon more distinct and deepen and entrench these new types. Another one of the Versus Nerd subtypes, and Megazord's really brainchild, is the Leviathan type, a water monster type. This would form like a pair with the Dragon type in terms of how you view these terrifying creatures. When you look to the sky, you fear the Hydreigon, the Salamence, these like enormous flying monstrous creatures, and you should equally fear the creatures under the sea. You should be afraid of Gyarados. It should be distinct that Gyarados, the Tentacruel, the Kraken, Kyogre, the Leviathan, that these are monstrous, terrifying creatures in their own right that should be distinct thematically from dragons and other types of Pokemon. Our last suggested new type is really two types and a change more than it's an addition, and it's really because flying type has a problem. There's only one pure flying type Pokemon, Tornadus, and half the time it looks like a dude in a cloud, and the other half the time it's a bird. And this really highlights the dual nature of flying as a type, and why we think it needs to be split into a wind type to highlight a more elemental nature, make it fit in more with fire and water and grass, and a bird type, because there is something fundamentally different between a Pidgey and other flying types of creatures. And this split would allow us to like explore more thoroughly like why are the bird Pokemon lumped together and why are the not bird Pokemon lumped in with them. I guess what I'm saying is that we need to put the generational birds and the elemental birds from Gen 1 and other very bird-like creatures into one place, and Charizard and other creatures that happen to fly in another place, because they are not alike. And wouldn't it be better to think of Charizard as like a fire wind type, as like this like elemental creature, because he's not like a Pidgey, and that's important. And I guess that wraps it up for our Pokemon type video. Let us know what you think. Do you think that there should be new types? What types do you think that there should be? And how do you feel about the types we've proposed here? Let us know in the comments, and next week we'll respond to everything you've said and kind of reflect on this video. Make sure you subscribe so you can catch that, and check back next week for more Versus Nerd stuff.